this morning, you can go ahead and open up to Genesis chapter 42. We're going to be reading the whole chapter here this morning, and we'll finish out that chapter. We're getting closer to the end, folks. Not a whole lot left. I think we've got less than 10 chapters left, or 8 after today. So we're almost through the book of Genesis. We've actually made pretty good timing through it too. It's not took us like 5 years, so that's a win because it took us like 5 years to get through Romans. I don't know what we were doing at the time, but we made it and we're here. So, but if you got a Bible, we'll go ahead and we'll open it up. So it says, when Jacob learned that there was grain for sale in Egypt, he said to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" And he said, "Behold, I have heard that there is grain for sale in Egypt. Go down and buy grain there for us, that we may live and not die." So 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy grain in Egypt, but Jacob did not send Benjamin, Joseph's brother, with his brothers for fear that harm might happen to him. Thus the sons of Israel came to buy among the others who came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now Joseph was governor over the land. He was the one who sold all to the people of the land. And Joseph's brothers came and bowed themselves before him with their faces to the ground. Joseph saw his brothers and recognized them, but he treated them like strangers and spoke roughly to them. "Where do you come from?" he said. They said, "From the land of Canaan to buy food." And Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. And Joseph remembered the dreams that he had dreamed of them. He said, "You are spies. You have come to see the nakedness of the land." They said to him, "No, my lord, your servants have come to buy food. We are all sons of one man. We are honest men. Your servants have never been spies." He said to them, "No, it is the nakedness of the land that you have come to see." And they said, "We, your servants, are 12 brothers, the sons of one man in the land of Canaan. And behold, the youngest is this day with our father, and one is no more." But Joseph said to them, "It is as I said to you, you are spies. But in this you shall be tested. By the life of Pharaoh, you shall not go from this place unless your youngest brother comes here. Send one of you, and let him bring your brother while you remain confined, that your words may be tested, whether there is truth in you. Or else, by the life of Pharaoh, surely you are spies." And he put them all together in custody for 3 days. On the third day, Joseph said to them, "Do this, and you will live, for I fear God. If you are honest men, let one of your brothers remain confined when you are in custody, and let the rest go and carry grain for the famine of your households, and bring your youngest brother to me. So your words will be verified, and you shall not die." And they did so. Then they said to one another, "In truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us, and we did not listen. This is why this distress has come upon us." And Reuben answered him, "Did I not tell you to sin against the boy? Did I tell you not to sin against the boy? But you did not listen. So now here comes a reckoning for his blood." They did not know that Joseph understood them, for there was an interpreter between them. Then he turned away from them and he wept. And he returned to them and spoke to them. He took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. And Joseph gave orders to fill the bags with grain and to replace every man's money in his sack and to give them provisions for the journey. This was done for them. Then they loaded their donkeys with their grain and departed. And as one of them opened their sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, he saw money in the mouth of his sack. He said to his brothers, "My money has been put back. Here it is in the mouth of my sack." At this, their hearts failed them. And they turned trembling to one another, saying, "What is it that God has done to us?" When they come to Jacob their father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, "The man, the Lord of the land, spoke roughly to us and took us to be spies of the land. But we said to him, 'We are honest men. We have never been spies. We are 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more. And the youngest is this day with our father in the land of Canaan.' Then the man, the Lord of the land, said to us, 'By this I shall know that you are honest man. Leave one of your brothers with me, and take the grain from the famine in your household and go your way. Bring your youngest brother to me. Then I shall know that you're not spies, but honest men, and I will deliver your brother to you. And you shall trade in the land.' As they emptied their sacks, behold, every man's bundle of money was in his sack. When they and their father saw their bundles of money, they were afraid. And Jacob said to them, 'You have bereaved my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And now you would take Benjamin. All this has come against me.' Then Reuben said to his father, 'Kill my 2 sons if I do not bring him back to you. Put him in your hands, and I will bring him back to you.' But he said, 'My son shall not go down with you, for his brother is dead, and he is the only one left. If harm should happen to him on the journey that you are to make, You are to bring my gray hairs with sorrow to Sheol. And may God add a blessing to the reading of his word here this morning. So this morning, before we spend time down in Egypt with Joseph, we need to take a moment to go back to Eden, so to speak. We have to remember that in the beginning, God put a man in the garden. What was it that he gave to that man? He gives him dominion. Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, take dominion over the earth, right? He gave him a world to cultivate. He gave him power. He gave him authority. He gave him responsibility. And he gave him fruitfulness. But the point of that power was never the man himself. Adam was given dominion so that life could spread, so that it could spread from him to others. That's what be fruitful and multiply is really about, right? Fruitfulness, life spreading. Now, as we know, what happened with Adam? What happened with Adam? Well, we know that Adam failed, right? He failed. And so from Genesis 3 onward, because of Adam's failure, we have been waiting for a man who would finally come and use power the way that power was meant to be used. We've been waiting for a man who would not use strength to take things, but use his strength to give things. Okay? So that's what Genesis 3 all the way up to now has been leading to. A stage has been set. We need a righteous Adam, basically. One who does not dominate the weak, but who feeds the hungry. One who does not protect himself, but is there to preserve and to perpetuate life. Now, in Genesis 42, here in the chapter that we're in this morning, we begin to see this kind of man. Now, it has to be said, Joseph is not perfect. He is not Jesus. He's not the Christ. But Joseph is what Adam was supposed to be, in some sense. Joseph was a man with dominion who uses it to keep other people alive. He rules a corner of the world the way that Adam was supposed to rule the entirety of the world. So hold that picture in your mind this morning as we kind of work through this whole chapter. Joseph has power. Joseph has authority. Joseph has resources. Joseph holds the grain, the bread. Joseph holds basically the future of his brothers in his hand. And it's important to see what he does with all of those things, okay? That's the question. What will Joseph do with these things? What will he do with the resources, the power, the authority, the grain, and the future of his brothers? Because this is always the question with power. What will you do with power when people who hurt you need something from you? What will you do when people who left you for dead in the pit show up hungry at your doorstep? What will you do with power when people who sinned against you finally are delivered into your hand? Genesis 42 shows us that answer. Joseph had power to crush his brothers, but instead, God in his sovereignty has chosen a man who instead will use his power to fill their sacks and to fill their bellies. So, let's look at the text here together this morning, if you would. Verses 1 through 5 begin here. Genesis 42, as we saw, begins with famine. Jacob sees that there's grain in Egypt, and he says to his sons, "Why do you look at one another?" In other words, Jacob's saying, "Why are you guys standing around? We're about to starve to death. Go get us some food. Okay, I'm an old man. I can't get out and wander Canaan the way that I used to. Go get us something to eat because we're all going to die. Okay, we're hungry." And so he learns that there's grain in Egypt. So he tells them to go down and buy some so that they may not die, but that they would live. Now, the chapter begins with empty stomachs, begins with empty sacks, hungry children, and a desperate household. The family of promise, which was coming through the line of Abraham, is starving to death. Now, this is where things start to get ironic. Okay? The brothers who once threw their own flesh and blood into a pit and ate as he was there, listening to him beg, now have empty sacks and hungry children themselves. It's ironic. The men who sold Joseph into Egypt now have to go into Egypt to survive. The men who took Joseph's coat and dipped it in blood now need Joseph's grain so that they themselves don't die. But notice what brings them to Egypt, to Joseph. It's not repentance. It's not confession. It's not 20 years of a tender conscience. It's not a handwritten apology. It's not even a family meeting where everybody finally owns up to what they have done. Hunger is the thing that brings them to Joseph's doorstep. 20 years does not seem to soften their hearts by itself. Time does not heal all wounds. Sometimes it just gives sin enough room to grow and pretend that it's wisdom. For 20 years, their guilt sat buried under work, family, routine, and silence. They never went looking for Joseph. They never returned to the pit. They just move on and leave him for dead. But God had not moved on. God sent the famine. This is how God typically works in hard men, more often than we would want to admit. He lets famine do what a lecture will not. This is one of the mercies of God. It does not feel like a mercy whenever it's happening. Sometimes God loves a man by making him hungry. Sometimes God saves a family by emptying their cupboards. So the brothers end up going down with other travelers because the famine was in the land of Canaan. Now, in verses 6 through 17, we see something interesting. Joseph, who's been left for dead, is now the Lord of the land. That's what the brothers call him, the Lord of the land. It can also be translated as governor, ruler. Okay? What that means, though, is he was the one who sold to all the people of the land. So they come to him when they find him. What do? What does Joseph's brothers do when they finally make it to him? They bow before him. Now, if you've been tracking along with what's been happening in Genesis, you know that there's something weighty happening here. The dream that Joseph had earlier. Does anybody remember the dream of Joseph that we talked about just a few weeks ago? What was Joseph's dream that got him sent to the pit to begin with? It was 12 stars. What were they doing? Gosh, this was a couple weeks ago. We done forgot. 12 stars. Joseph's dream. They're bowing down to him. The 12 sheaves. They're bowing down to him. This is a fulfillment of Joseph's dream that got him put in the pit in the first place. His brothers have now come to Egypt. And now what are they doing? They're bowing before him. Just like God said in the dream. Brothers that mocked his dream of 12 stars are now acting it out unknowingly. The men who once said, "Shall you indeed reign over us?" are now bowing their faces to the ground. The men who stripped him, sold him, are now standing in front of him, asking him to sell them bread. You see the irony. They sell him off. Now they're begging for him to sell to them. That's how God typically works, ironically. This is what G.K. Bill, for those of you who are theology nerds, would call an ironic overturning in the scriptures, or what he would call a redemptive reversal. Now, when they get there, they don't recognize Joseph, but he recognizes them. Joseph knows exactly who they are. He knows Reuben, he knows Judah, he knows Simeon, he knows Levi, he knows the sound of their voices, he knows them from the last time he saw their face, and now they're there on the ground looking up at him. Joseph literally holds here every card. He's got the ace. Right, there's a Motorhead song about the ace of spades, right? He's got the ace of spades in his hand here. He's got the grain. He's got the army. He's got the prison. He's got the throne's authority behind him. He's got the law on his side. He's got the moral high ground. And he has the memory of their sin. If Joseph wanted revenge, there was nobody on earth who could have stopped him. He could have jailed him. He could have looked at him and said, whoa, boys, you remember whenever you threw me in that pit and you sat there and had a meal and listened to me beg and cry and plead to get out? Ironic that you're coming to me hungry now. He could have let him starve to death. He could have said, you threw me into the pit, and so I'm going to throw you into prison. He could have said, you sold me for silver. Now let me see what your lives are worth. He could have done any of these things, and every nation on the earth would have called it justice. But instead, surprisingly, he chooses not to crush them. Instead, he tests them. And that really, really matters here. Joseph, it says, speaks roughly to them. At least that's what they say. He spoke roughly to us. He accuses them of being spies. He presses them. He asks about their family. He holds on to Simeon. He puts him into custody for 3 days. It's important to know here that Genesis 42 is not a sentimental text. It's not about the reunion yet and the forgiveness. It does not pretend that the deep wounds here get fixed in one conversation. It doesn't rush Joseph into a tearful reunion just so everybody can feel better. Joseph's not being petty here, he's being wise. Because forgiveness does not mean pretending that trust was not broken. Forgiveness does not mean handing someone the same knife they stabbed you with before, hoping that they use it better this time. Forgiveness does not mean skipping the truth, or repentance, or testing, or wisdom, or time. Joseph is doing something here. He's testing whether these men are still the same men who threw him away. Will they abandon another brother in jail? Will they sacrifice Benjamin the same way that they sacrificed him? Will they tell the truth whenever it costs them? Will they carry guilt or will they keep hiding it? Joseph's roughness here is not revenge. It's more like an antibiotic. It's like surgery. Think about what an antibiotic does. What's it do? Clears away the infection. That's what his roughness here is. The truth is, sometimes grace has to cut before it can heal. Sometimes it has to cut before it can heal. Sometimes mercy has to speak roughly before it can speak softly. Sometimes the antibiotic has to be applied, even when you don't want it to be, so that the infection can finally go away. And this is where the story begins to take a turn, because the wronged man has all the power. And what he does with the power here shows us the true shape of what forgiveness looks like. Joseph had the power to crush them, but instead he uses that power to fill their sacks. Now look with me, if you would, in verses 18 through 25. This is the heart of this chapter. After 3 days, how many days? How many days? 3 days. Keep that in mind. Joseph says to them, do this and you will live, for I fear God. That whole line explains his driving factor, his force, what it is that he's thinking about. It shows that he is a man who is not rooted in revenge, but in the fear of God. Joseph's not governed by his memories of what they've done to him. He's governed by the God who watched it happen. This is why he can be trusted with power. A man who does not fear God cannot safely hold power over people who have wronged him. Do you hear me? A man who does not fear God cannot safely hold power and wield it over people who have wronged them. Take a look around the world. How many people do you see getting power and they wield it against the people that have wronged them in the past? If your pain is ultimate, revenge will look righteous. If the woundedness you have in you is your Lord, bitterness will sound like wisdom. But Joseph instead fears God. He says, let one of your brothers remain confined when you're in custody. Let the rest go and carry the grain for the famine to your households. He sends them home with grain. Instead of taking revenge, he feeds them. Like, don't miss that. Let that show you what the shape of forgiveness looks like. We think of forgiveness in our time as this vague thing. It's like, I forgive them, but I don't forget. I'm going to hold on to this. I'll never let them close again. It's never going to happen again. Look at what forgiveness is. Instead of saying, yep, forgive and forgot, yeah, you guys are on your own, do your own thing, he literally, personally fills their sacks. The brothers are guilty. They've not yet confessed their sins to Joseph. They've not made restitution. They've not even offered an apology. They don't even know who he is. But what's Joseph do anyway? No apology, no confessed sin, no restitution. Joseph still fills their sacks. He gives bread to the men who left them for dead. Now, while they're finally talking amongst themselves, we see that their guilt finally does surface, though. In verse 21, look there if you would in verse 21. Said to one another, in truth, we are guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the distress of his soul when he begged us and we did not listen. This is why this distress has come upon us. So here's the first time that we see them taking responsibility for what they did to Joseph. 20 years later, the truth finally comes out. For 2 decades, they had buried that moment. But now, under the pressure of hunger, of fear, of accusation, imprisonment, the truth finally comes out. We saw the distress of his soul. We learn something here in this passage that Genesis 37 actually doesn't teach us plainly. We see here that Joseph, when he was in the pit, was distressed. So much so that he actually begged. Imagine that. Imagine Joseph in the pit while his brothers are sitting there, laughing, having a good time. And he's in the pit begging them, pleading with them, crying from the pit while they eat their meal while he cries. Let the weight of that sit with you. These men, none of us have been wronged by people the way that Joseph has been wronged by his brothers. And we hold bitterness and resentment in a far greater way than we ought. This is what they remember here. Not that they just sold him. They remember his voice. They remember the distress of his soul. They remember that he begged and that they would not listen. And he hears it. They don't know that he understands them because he's using an interpreter, right? It says that there's an interpreter in the passage. So apparently it's safe to say that Joseph's speaking Egyptian to them and for somebody translating into Hebrew. But Joseph understands what they're saying. And verse 24 says this, he turned away from them and he wept. He wept. He weeps. He does not weep in front of them yet. He turns away, but the tears are real, but they're hidden for now. Then he returns and he speaks to them. He takes Simeon, he binds them before their eyes, he gives the command, he gives the orders in verse 25, fill their bags with grain, replace every man's money in his sack, give them the provisions for their journey. He's still speaking roughly. Simeon's still bound. The family's still jacked up and fractured. The wound is still open. The embrace and the forgiveness has not happened yet, but the sacks are still full. That means that Joseph's hands are moving towards mercy for everything in the relationship feels healed. Do you understand what I'm saying? This is where many of us misunderstand forgiveness. We think that forgiveness begins when the feeling arrives. Okay, now I feel like I can finally let go. I feel like I can forgive this person now. We think that we have to wait until we get that feeling in our chest, our anger's gone, our memories are beginning to fade now, and that our emotions are finally settled. But notice Joseph. Joseph's hands were full of grain while his heart was still full of grief. He didn't wait till the wound stopped hurting before he stopped acting like they were his enemy. He didn't wait until he felt tender before he gave bread to them. He didn't wait until the tears were public before his mercy became visible. Joseph forgave them with his hands before his heart caught up. Some of us here this morning need to hear that. Many of us are carrying wounds that are not, just to be frank with you, not going to close this year. We're carrying betrayals that still have a voice. We're carrying family pain, marriage pain, church pain, friendship pain, childhood pain. And when you hear the word forgiveness, you think, I cannot feel that yet. I cannot let that go just yet. And maybe you can't, but you can still fill the sack the way that Joseph did, even if you don't feel like it yet. You may not be able to feel warm towards whoever has betrayed you yet, but you can refuse revenge. You may not be ready for embrace yet, but you can stop rehearsing their destruction in your mind. You may not be able to trust them yet, but you can pray that God feeds them. You may not be able to say everything is fine, but you can say, I will not use my power to make you starve. That's what dominion is. Dominion is it the perpetuation of destruction and chaos? No. Being a dominion man and woman of God is perpetuating life. Forgiveness is not the same thing as immediate reconciliation. That's important. We all need to know that. Doesn't mean handing a knife back to somebody so that they can stab you with it over and over again. Does not mean that at all. Forgiveness is not the same thing as restored trust. Forgiveness is not the same thing as pretending that this person did not betray you and throw you in the pit. Forgiveness is refusing to make that person pay with their life because Christ has already paid with his. Forgiveness is when the one with the right to crush somebody gives bread instead. Look at the beautiful reversal here. They stripped Joseph and threw him in the pit, yet he fills their bags with grain. They sell him for silver. What's he do? He puts silver back into their bags. Can you imagine that? Somebody thieving, stealing from you, selling you off, selling whatever, and you give them back the very thing that they sold you off for? They sent him away empty. He sends them away full. They use their hands to abandon him. He uses his hands to preserve their life. Every wrong did to him, he answers with life. That's what godly dominion looks like. That's what dominion is. This is what Adam was supposed to do. Now, you have to ask yourself the question, how can Joseph do that? Right? How can a man stand in front of people who ruined his life? Literally, quite literally. Not only did they put him in a pit, sell him off to a caravan of people who came, he also ends up in prison for years. Okay, by all accounts, they've ruined his life. How can he use his power to preserve their lives? The answer is dominion. Joseph can forgive like this because Joseph has become the kind of man who understands what power is actually for. Power is not for revenge. It's not for self-protection. It's not for feeding your ego. Power is not for making everybody who hurt you feel small. Power is for life. Power is for giving bread to those. It's for being strong for those who are weak. Joseph has the power to crush them, but he uses it to feed. He is the opposite of his brothers. Think about who his brothers have been throughout this entirety of the Genesis story. They dominated their brother in the pit. They've dominated the vulnerable with multiple women in these stories, Bilhah, Tamar, right? Even their father's involved in some of this stuff. They dominate ones who can't fight back. They're strong when someone else was weak. That's not dominion. That's thuggery. That's domination. And a man's not proven by what he can take from the weak. A man is proven by what the weak receive because he's strong. That is the essence of godly masculinity. Joseph is the opposite man all the way down. When he's in Potiphar's wife, what's he do? Refuses to take what is not his. When he was in prison, what's he do? What's he do to the prisoners? He serves men who can give him nothing. When he stood before Pharaoh, he told the truth and gave God the glory. And now, when he has everything in Egypt, everything, he refuses to use his authority to destroy these men who have destroyed him. I can't sum it up any better. I can't hardly tell you what it looks like to be godly any better than that. I can't show you what it looks like to be a man any better than that. That's what power is for. Joseph is a righteous Adam. He's a man with character. He's a man with dominion. Real dominion is measured by who eats because you were the one that carried the weight. That's what Adam was supposed to be. That's what husbands are called to be. It's what fathers are called to be. It's what elders of churches are supposed to be. This is what every Christian with any kind of strength is called to be. God does not give you strength so you can finally make everyone pay attention to you. God gives you strength so that others might live because of you. God does not give you authority so that you can become untouchable. God gives you authority so that the people under your care can eat. He gives you resources so that you can serve others. Now, let me say this. This is why victimhood and that type of mentality is so destructive and cannot be your final identity. Yes, Joseph was wronged. Yes, Joseph was sinned against. Yes, Joseph was betrayed. But Joseph did not build his life around what had happened to him in the pit. Do you see what I'm saying? You understand what I'm saying? There are so many of us who define our lives and our stories by what has happened to us in the past. Joseph does not do that. He does not make the worst thing that has ever happened to him the throne of his identity. He let God take him from the pit to the palace, so to speak, so that when the time came, he would be the man with bread in his hands. Some of us never move past the pit because the pit has become the only story that we know how to tell. But God does not only heal you so that you can stop hurting, God also heals you so that you become the kind of person who eventually feeds others. He gives you grain for someone else's famine. He gives you mercy so mercy can move through you. He gives you dominion so that life may perpetuate and spread. Joseph is showing us what a man was always made to be. But it's also important to say here, Joseph is not enough. He is not enough. As righteous as Joseph was, he was not perfect. Even Joseph points to one beyond himself. Joseph gives bread to men who left him for dead. Jesus Christ gives his body to men who actually nailed him down. So now we come back to the table where we began at the beginning of the sermon and where we're about to head to now. Joseph gave grain to the men who betrayed him. Jesus gave himself to the people who crucified him. Which is greater? Joseph was thrown into a pit by his brothers. Jesus was laid in a grave by the sins of his people. Joseph rose from the pit to feed nations. Jesus rose from the dead to feed the world. Joseph returns silver to the guilty. Jesus pays the debt of the guilty of those who traded him off for silver with his own blood. Joseph gave bread to men who left him for dead. Christ gives his body to the men who actually nailed him down. When we come to the Lord's table this morning, this is what we are coming to hold. Bread is not a symbol of our moral achievement. It's actually not a symbol at all. It's the real presence of Jesus Christ who gives life to those who come to him in faith. It is a means of grace. The table is not for people who have successfully healed all of their wounds. The table is for sinners who need the greater Joseph to feed them. So come hungry. Come Eucharistically with thanksgiving and gladness. Come with celebrating. Come with your wounds. Come with your grief. Come with the family story that still hurts to tell. Come with the marriage pain. Come with the betrayal. Come with the people you have buried. Come with the people you cannot fix. Come with forgiveness that you know Christ commands, even if your heart is still limping towards it. You do not have to feel forgiveness perfectly before you come and hold the bread of life. Joseph's hands were full of grain while his heart was still full of grief. And Christ does not wait for you to become lovely before he feeds you. He feeds enemies, he makes them sons. He feeds the guilty, he makes them clean. He feeds the hungry, he makes them whole. So come to the table. The Lord, who was left for dead, has been storing up for bread for the people who have wronged. And in a moment, you're going to hold it in your hands. So come hungry, come to the table. Let's prepare ourselves to come and to feast with the Lord. Let's take a moment.